climate change and extreme weather and how to prepare for future events. In terms of environmental justice, it is worth noting that vulnerable communities often have the hardest time recovering from hurricanes, floods, and other extreme weather events. This is an area that needs to be addressed before the next big storm. In February, Storm Uri exposed the fragile state of our power grid as well as our water systems. We are facing unprecedented weather challenges, and we must work to get adequate measures in place to be prepared. Just earlier this month, NOAA announced that an average Atlantic hurricane season will now have more storms. An average season now has 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes, which is a Cat 3, 4, or 5. 2020 had a record 30 named storms. Now is the time to get prepared for what 2021 will bring us this hurricane season. Jim Blackburn is joining us today. He's a professor in the practice of environmental law at Rice University, as well as being the co-director of Rice's Severe Storm Prediction, Education, and Evacuation from Disaster Center. He's going to talk to us first about his concerns regarding flooding in Houston.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia, and I think I can share my screen. And I'll go here. We'll get started. Start off there. Can everyone see that okay, Julia? Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Excellent. Okay, the work I'm going to talk about really comes out of Rice University Severe Storm Center, what we call the SPEED Center. Phil Bedian is the director. I'm the co-director of the SPEED Center. And we really started studying tropical storms and hurricanes after Hurricane Ike in 2008. And I think the research that we've done has been incredibly eye-opening. And what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about, I think, something that we just don't talk enough about, and that is the impact of climate change on the storms that we're facing. Bobby Tudor, who was chairman of the Rice trustees at one point, was also president of the Houston Partnership back in 2020 in January, when he gave his kind of State of Houston presentation. And he really made a marvelous presentation about the need of Houston, and particularly the oil and gas industry, to get kind of on the same page with the rest of the world. And because at that time, the Biden administration did not come in yet. We did not yet have kind of our agreement to go back into the Paris Accords. But Bobby Tudor was talking about the fact that Houston is going to have to make a pivot. And the pivot he was talking about here was really the acceptance of a carbon limited future, and the fact that net zero thinking was going to become pervasive throughout the world, leading to net zero in 2050. And it was really the first time, I think, there had been a public declaration that Houston was going to have to make an adjustment to climate change from a business community standpoint. And I welcome this. I thought it was really one of the most important presentations that has been made in Houston in the 21st century, because it really, I think, sets the tone for the challenges ahead from a business community standpoint. What I am concerned about is that while the business community, I think, has gotten the message about carbon, I don't know that we as a community have really gotten the message about climate change and about the power of climate change, and about the really how climate change is going to change the conditions that we deal with. And so I'd like to start off with the bell curve. Just, for those of you that might not remember, a bell curve is kind of the distribution of data across, across a field, if you will, with the average being where the middle of the bell curve, it kind of extrudes upwards. And then you go to your kind of more rare events as you move toward the edges of the bell curve, either one side or the other. And we hear a lot about the 100-year flood. And The 100-year event is the quote unquote 1% event. And it's an event that you would expect to have recur once every 100 years based upon a distribution of data really over the past. And so much of our engineering, so much of our urban design, so much of the way we think of things is based on what the past tells us. I mean, that's quite frankly, what much of our academic work is about learning from the past and how to apply those lessons to the future. Now, if you look at our rainfall events, and I'm going to talk about two things today. I'm going to talk about rainfall, and then I'm going to talk about surge flooding. And they're very different problems, and they have very different manifestations in our community. And both are being affected dramatically by climate change. There's Allison, 2001. Harris County Flood Control kind of did a report about it, and basically was talking about Allison as an outlier, about how it was a rare event, one that one would not expect to see again. But it was probably, I think at that point in time, one might have thought it was in a 1,000-year recurrence interval. Tax Day, 2015, more than 100-year, less than Allison. Harvey in 2017, more than Allison, a rarer still event, if you will. Harvey, by some statistics, was either somewhere between a 10,000 and 40,000 year recurrence event. Again, based on the statistics going back to the 30s, the 40s, that we have relied upon for our thinking for so many years. And then we have Imelda in 2019. Again, a very rare storm event by these past statistics. And I think what this begins to tell me is that, one, our statistics are changing. We're seeing new patterns emerge. And I saw a wonderful presentation about the edge of the bell curve. And an analyst, an economist, was making a presentation. He put up these two red lines, and he put TBD there. And, you know, to be determined, that didn't make a lot of sense. There'll be dragons. There are literally dragons at the edge of the bell curve. These are your incredibly rare events. We are actually on the other side of the bell curve in a horrible drought now in the Western United States. The papers that I have read about climate change from the people that really know what they're talking about are saying we're going to see much more drought events, much greater drought, and then much more severe rainfall, and probably less in between. And so our future is going to be fraught with extremes. Right now, we're about 6 inches behind in our rainfall. If you get further west, the drought intensifies going into the Western United States. Well, what we've never really talked about very much as a society, what we've never talked about very much as certainly a Houston community, is climate has already changed. There has already been 1 degree centigrade increase from 1901 to 2012. That has occurred. The climate has changed. What we're seeing now are the impacts of climate change. And saw some recent polling out of Yale that indicate a lot of people don't think climate change is affecting them. They think it'll affect others, but not necessarily them. And I just don't think we've done a very good job of talking about, because it's been a subject that, you know, you don't get a lot of social invitations, perhaps, if you talk a lot about climate change in Houston. Certainly that was true 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It is an incredibly difficult subject, but it's an incredibly important one for us to talk about. Now, this is a map coming out of a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA Atlas 14 study. And this map shows essentially changes in rainfall patterns that particularly down here on the Texas coast, and it kind of, there's a swath right through the middle of Texas where there have been significant changes in rainfall, and this is through 2017. It doesn't include Imelda, it doesn't include some of the earlier storms. And I took some Harris County flood control data and put the NOAA Atlas 14 with our historic 100-year rainfall, and then wanted to compare that to Imelda, Harvey, Tax Day, Allison, and even a storm back in October of '94. And we base all of our kind of thinking around the 24-hour, 100-year event. And up until recently, in fact, the floodplain maps that are still official use 13 inches in 24 hours as our official 100-year rainfall event. 17 inches in 24 hours is what NOAA Atlas 14 has now come up with. So their redo of the statistics, which are still heavily weighted in the past, have raised our average rainfall or our 100-year rainfall by 4 inches. 33% increase that has occurred really between probably 1980 and 2017. But look at these numbers out here from Harvey. We had 25 inches in 24 hours. Imelda, we had 21 inches in 24 hours. Tax Day, right at the 100-year. Allison we had probably the most rainfall in 24 hours that we've seen with 28 inches. 21 inches back in October of '94. Many of us are concerned that the updated NOAA Atlas 14, which is the basis upon which we're redoing all of our 100-year floodplain mapping, is not high enough. That we are going to be looking at much more rainfall than 17 inches as a reasonable 100-year estimate. I'm hopeful of working with some of the people that are really excellent in statistics and try to begin to really tease out these changes that are occurring because of climate change and be able to take a hard look at these. Now, this is a graphic that we did for the northeast part of town. This is, it's a little hard to see. This is Beltway 8 across the top. This is 59. This is going to be the Hardy Toll Road. This is going to be 45 north. This is Greens Bayou coming across here. And this is Hall's Bayou coming through here. The point of this is Harvey. This is the flooding that happened during Harvey. And this is in probably the most heavily impacted area. Julia was talking about equity and issues. Northeast Houston, Northeast Harris County has probably the most severe equity issues of any part of town because we've just not gotten their fair share of flood control. But the point here is these big rainfall events are overwhelming. If you notice, our road systems end up being a bit of a barricade here. Getting that water out and into the Galveston Bay system is an incredible challenge. But we've also got to get it through the ditches. We've got to get it through the, basically that's flowing through the neighborhoods there. It's flowing through neighborhoods here. We just don't have a system that can handle the type of water we have the risk of getting. And I think we're going to have to make a lot more room for water in this community, and we're going to have to do it sooner than later. And most people don't want to be bought out. Buyout is probably the most effective tool that we have. But we need to have a lot of money available when the next big storm comes, because people will sell after they've been flooded when they haven't spent the money to repair. It's very difficult to get people to basically to sell out after they have restored their homes, perhaps waterproofed them, perhaps elevated them. Now, I want to move to the coast. The total number of hurricanes until this recent report coming out of NOAA seemed to be holding steady. We may be seeing now a trend for more storms. I want to hear more about that. There is no question that the intensity of our storms are increasing. There's been a 25 to 30% increase in the annual number of category 3, 4, and 5 storms since '75. There's a doubling of Cat 4 and 5 storms that are basically anticipated going forward. This is the one I want to focus on to begin with. rapid intensification is more common. Maria, Irma, Harvey, Jose, Laura, all of those experienced rapid intensification. And I want to talk about that. I also want to say that a study out of MIT basically said for Houston, by 2100, a 20-inch rainfall will be about a 5-year storm based on some of the projections from climate change. Basically, Harvey becoming a 5-year storm, something a little smaller than Harvey, but significant, being an incredibly common event. That's what we're looking at, and I don't think we're talking about this. This is Harvey. Look here, August 23rd, Harvey reformed as a tropical storm. It strengthened into a hurricane on August 24th, and it made landfall as a Category 4 storm at Port Aransas on August 25th. There was virtually no time to prepare to move out because of the rapid intensification. This is Laura, and this is from 2020. Tuesday at 1 p.m., Laura was a Category 1 storm. Wednesday at 7 p.m., Laura was a Category 3 storm. Most of the coastal residents I'm familiar with, I've talked to that are friends, many of them do not leave if it's a Category 1 storm. I would tell you, if you have not begun to evacuate Tuesday night, and by the time it becomes a Cat 3, 7 p.m. Wednesday, it's coming ashore at 7 a.m. Thursday. There is literally no time to prepare. And that is going to kill a lot of people in the Houston region. This is a simulation of a hurricane. This is 12 hours before landfall, and the landfall that I'm going to be talking about is down here on the south end of Galveston Island, down toward Freeport. That's the most dangerous area for the Galveston Big Bay region. We have the dirty side of the storm circulating back here to the north, and so at Speed Center, we've done a lot of hurricane projections. And this is 12 hours before the storm. This is 6 hours before landfall. And you can see Galveston is severed right here at the end of the seawall. Bolivar is severed here, it is severed here, and likely severed there. You're not going to be getting off of any of these islands. Frankly, 12 hours, if you're not off, you're not leaving. It's just about not going to happen, and certainly not at 6 hours before landfall. At landfall, now this is a small Category 4 storm. I say small. It's not. Its wind speed is at the very kind of low end, about 130 miles an hour. It's hitting down further south, and at landfall, this is what happens. The Galveston seawall is overtopped to 17 feet. The Texas City levee is beginning to be broached with water coming around and beginning to go over the top. And you're beginning to see significant flooding up in the Dickinson Bayou and up in the Clear Lake area. But it's not too bad yet. 2 hours after landfall, we've got 22 feet of water, 21, 22, 20 feet of water all through the Clear Lake area. NASA's flooded all through Dickinson. Texas City is totally overwhelmed, and Galveston is pretty much underwater. It gets worse as we go further in time, coming up the Houston Ship Channel. 6 hours after landfall, you've got the worst of the storm surge up in the upper part of the Ship Channel, up around 24 to 26 feet. We've never seen anything like that up the channel. Most of the industrial complex would be about 10 feet underwater. Tanks will rupture, processes will be shut down. And there's, and then this is 12 hours, the water is receding. This is the slide I want to show you. This dark purple area is the area that would be inundated by that storm. There's about, certainly over 500,000 people in that area. possibly as many as 750. We took the populations of the cities that were impacted, and they may all not be in those areas. But if those people cannot evacuate, if those people choose not to leave because it was a small storm, maybe even a tropical storm that was coming, and it accelerated into a Cat 4 storm overnight, or certainly a Cat 5, we're not able to handle that. I mean, this is pure exposure, and hurricane surge flooding is extremely dangerous. It is violent. We're talking about water that is high with 150 mile, 130 to 150 mile an hour winds driving waves on top of it. And then it just becomes like a battering ram. And once you start knocking one house down, that house comes and batters the house behind it. And you can have a tremendous amount of destruction from these surge. Up in the ship channel, we estimate with about the 25-foot surge, there would probably be about somewhere around 90 million gallons of oil and hazardous substances that would be released, that would come into Houston and then would go back out into Galveston Bay. Now, I want to end with two slides. What I am talking about is not a pleasant thing to talk about. And I don't think that most people realize that this risk is increasing every year. If we don't address climate change, this will continue to worsen. Now, our community has the wrong attitude about these issues. This is a marker that was put up in the Clear Lake area, somewhere like Bay Area Boulevard and El Camino, Nassau Road 1, El Camino, one of the major intersections down there. I can't remember exactly where. And it was a marker about how high a Cat 4 storm surge would be and how high a Cat 5 storm surge would be. And this was put up after Ike, because we got lucky with Ike. Ike probably would have killed 2,000 to 4,000 people if it had hit 30, 40 miles further south. As it is, it came, basically Ike missed us. It came right up the middle of Galveston Bay, and its worst impacts were to the east. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't a lot of damage. It was about $25 billion storm in terms of damage, but it could have been tremendously worse. But anyway, this marker was put up, and it only lasted 2 months. It was taken down because it interfered with home sales. Now think about that for a minute. Our priority in this community is not telling people about risk. Our priority in this community is to not interfere with home sales. If that attitude prevails, we're never going to make the progress that we're going to need to make. We have got to be honest about climate change and about what's happening. Bottom line, we need new tools to fight climate change. We need new analytics. We need new engineering thinking. New tools mean change. Change is very hard. I have been talking about this for quite some time, and I can attest to how hard change is. And I'm optimistic. There are things that can be done, but if we don't talk about this honestly, I think we're going to have a major tragedy. And there's just not a sense of urgency in this community about these issues that I think it needs to exist. And with that, I will stop my presentation. I think there's going to be question and answers later. And I'll turn it over to Julia.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. That was really informative. And it's good to be informed, right? If we don't have the information, then we don't know what to prepare for. So I am also going to share a PowerPoint, and I'm going to go through a couple slides pretty fast so that we have time for question and answer, but I will upload and save the PowerPoint that I have on Fondren's has a hub website, and I'll share that URL at the end of the program. So if you want to go and look at any of this, it will be there along with lots of online resources. Okay, so here is the PowerPoint about getting ready for extreme weather. And the library has become what's called a CREW hub, resilience hub. And CREW is a nonprofit based out of Boston, Massachusetts. And CREW's philosophy is really great. It's climate change impacts all of us. So we want to be able to prepare for climate change in the ways that will best serve ourselves and our community. If we start preparing and planning from the ground up, engaging everyone and coordinating across neighborhoods, we can have a real impact that is both large scale and locally meaningful. Advocacy and change at the state or national level is important, but it's important to organize as communities. And that's a lot about what we're going to talk about to start off with. And so what are climate resilience hubs? Well, they're institutions like Fondren Library, where the Houston community can meet to learn about extreme weather events and how to be prepared. Here's a map of the climate resilience hubs that are in place. There's 42 hubs as of January, and they are expanding. And I think it's really terrific because libraries, particularly, there are other like churches that have joined to be climate resilience hubs, but it's great because it's connecting the community with government resources and information. So as we prepare for extreme weather, connected communities is very key to responding. And an example is the 1995 Chicago heat wave. So what happened is that heat wave led to 739 heat-related deaths in Chicago over a period of just 5 days. Most of the victims of the heat wave were elderly, poor residents who couldn't afford air conditioning and didn't open windows or sleep outside because they were worried about crime. The heat tied or broke a number of records from July 12th to July 16th, 1995, and it peaked on July 13th at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees above normal. This is an environmental justice issue because neighborhoods that have more money and are better taken care of and have more green spaces and community involvements tend to have stronger social ties. However, Black and Brown communities often have worse environmental impacts on them. They have less social ties. And what we can learn from what happened in Chicago is that social ties in Chicago helped neighborhoods. For example, the Little Village neighborhood, which had strong social connections, had 12 times a lower death rate than a neighborhood that is nearby called North Lawndale. Both had similar levels of income and a similar number of elders that were living alone. But the Little Village neighborhood came out stronger because of its social ties. So there's going to be even more extreme weather coming our way, unfortunately. And so it's really important to put measures in place for social resilience. Libraries are going to be key to helping connecting people with information and connecting people with their neighbors, hopefully. Being prepared for them together can save not just your life, but those around you. And here in Houston, we have 2 City of Houston initiatives. One is called Complete Communities that was launched in April 2017 as a citywide initiative to revitalize Houston's most under-resourced neighborhoods. The mission of Complete Communities is to create a more equitable and prosperous city for all Houstonians by working with local stakeholders and cross-sector partners to improve designated neighborhoods. The Resilient Houston strategy dates from 2020 when the City of Houston received an award notice of the Resilient Communities Grant Program, which is administered by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and funded by Wells Fargo to help communities address and mitigate the impact of natural disasters and a changing climate. And then the Kinder Institute prepared a report dated February 2020, and it highlights the work that's taking place with these two initiatives. And it analyzes 5 pilot complete communities that build community resilience and documents the best practices for future work in additional Houston neighborhoods. And it also documents how these efforts directly connect the Complete Communities program and the Resilient Houston strategy. Now we're going to move into neighbors helping neighbors. It's important to develop a community network by creating a phone tree, text chain, and an organizational chart. And these are systems that can be put into place. So one coordinator will call or text key group members who will have a list of neighbors to inform themselves. The key is to make sure that the group members are reliable and that they will call and text others, and that there are multiple ways to get in touch with your neighbors. And here's the phone tree example. And this could also be adapted to be texting, which I found to be extremely helpful during Storm Uri. The important thing is to make a plan. And emergency plans force you to think about what you would do during an emergency before it happens. So it saves time when disaster strikes. And it also makes you feel more confident because you're prepared. It's important to talk to your family about the risks in your community, i.e. here in Houston. We know those are primarily flooding and hurricanes, but can also be extreme heat and cold. And you need to discuss what to do and where to meet if a disaster does happen. And it's important to partner up with someone from your community to talk about climate impacts you're most worried about and how you will get prepared. And here's a picture of groups getting together. Obviously, we can't meet in person right now, and about a Red Cross. And I have included that in Fondren's hub website. That URL is included there, so you don't need to copy it. And here's just a short slide about making a kit. And often it's things that you already have around the house. And it's just collecting the basic items that you'll need in the event of an emergency. Now we're going to talk about flooding. And here's a picture from 2015 showing Houston underwater. Impacts like from climate change, from extreme weather and rising sea levels can cause flooding in coastal and inland areas. The floodplains in our country are expected to grow by 45% by the end of this century. And if we move on to what to do before a flood, you need to have your emergency plan like we talked about. You need to build a emergency kit, put electronics and important documents on high shelves, sign up for local alert systems, charge your devices, have backup batteries ready, clear your gutters, downspouts and drains, and if you can, buy flood insurance or renter's insurance. Once a flood hits, it depends really on where you are and the impact of the warning time of the flood, but you need to go to a safe location that you've identified previously. However, if you need to evacuate, you need to do that right away. And we all know, don't walk or drive through flooded streets, turn around, listen to weather radios and emergency notifications, specifically the emergency alert system and NOAA weather radio. And if your building's flooding, go to the highest level, but don't go to a closed attic. And here's some information. Here's a picture from Hurricane Harvey and with some of the 4-day rainfall totals that we experienced then. Now, with climate change and hurricanes, it's uncertain if it's going to lead to more hurricanes, but it's obvious that it does lead to more severe hurricanes because of the sea level rise in warming waters. So in order to prepare for hurricanes, you need to have a family communication plan. Like we talked about for flooding, and you need to have your kit. Other things are you need to have a full tank of gas. Everyone talks about that. And you need to have emergency supplies in your vehicle in case you have to evacuate. It's important to have a secondary plan in the event that you're sheltering in your home and it begins to flood. And again, insurance should be purchased if possible. Outside preparations need to include securing outside furniture and looking for items that might be blown around by a hurricane, right? Gardening supplies, tools, trampolines need to be tied down, or other objects that could become projectiles. And if you can, you should cover your windows with storm shutters or marine plywood. And some people may need to fasten down their roof. Now, inside the house, you need to do things like unplug most of your electronics, except for your refrigerator and freezer, which should be set to the coldest setting in case you do lose power. Keep important documents in a waterproof container, and clean and fill bathtubs and fill all available containers with water. So during a hurricane, remain indoors in an interior hallway, bathroom, or a closet on the lowest level of your house. Stay away from all windows, close the interior doors. Seek shelter under something sturdy, like a dining room table, to protect yourself. And if power is lost, have your flashlight handy, don't use candles. And you shouldn't go outside either. You should stay inside. And then if you do have to evacuate, some things that experts recommend is to remove fuses from air conditioners to prevent them from being damaged, turn off water to prevent flooding from broken pipes, and move important items to higher floors. We also have winter storms like Storm Uri. And here's some pictures showing Storm Uri. It's hard to believe that our city was shut down and that many are still dealing with the after effects of broken pipes and other issues, right? So with an increase in greenhouse gas emissions, climate change contributes to more intense cold spells, and warmer temperatures in the Arctic lead to Arctic jet streams that affect lower latitudes and bring sub-zero temperatures with it, like Storm Uri. Despite global warming, extreme cold weather events are still going to occur. I saw a lot of people on social media say that Storm Uri proves there's no global warming. Well, I think that they just need to do a little bit more research to find out why we're getting this extreme weather, right? Winter storm warnings happen when there's life-threatening conditions, and they can begin within 24 hours of those warnings. So you should prepare for cold weather now. And all these slides, like I said, will be put onto Fondren's Hub website, so you can review these, and there are brochures that talk about what to do for preparing for all the extreme events. And then there are specific things to do to stay safe during cold weather, to stay off the roads, to don't only use generators and grills away from windows so you avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. I know there was at least one death during Storm Uri from that. And I think here we go again about checking on your neighbors. Those that are older and children are more at risk during times of extreme cold. And then here's a picture of extreme heat that the Houston-Galveston area had on August 14th, 2020, not even a year ago. These things need to be prepared for, because as climate change progresses, extremely hot days are going to happen more frequently and will become more intense. So heat waves are becoming more common, and you need to be prepared for them. And there are different ways to prepare for heat: by covering your windows, staying hydrated, avoiding exercising and strenuous activities, staying in cool places, and being alert for heat-related sicknesses. And again, check on your neighbors. And then we do have further resources that are available. We have brochures at the bottom. You can see the URL, which I can share in the chat: library.rice.edu, Climate Resilience Hub. There's a lot more information there too about online resources, and you can learn more. These are also websites that are on Fondren's Hub website about future climate projections, more preparation from the federal government for severe weather, and about CREW if you want to find out more about CREW. And then there are some local resources, and I'm going to point out this first one, readyhoustontexas.gov. It's about getting help to get to know your neighbors, and there's actual kits that you can request so that you can connect with your community. And I honestly think right now that is the #1 thing that we all need to do. We'd like to take some question and answers right now, or take some questions so that we can answer them. So if you want to share them in the chat, or if you'd like to ask them, you can go ahead and do so right now. And here's my information, jecrest@rice.edu. And then there is also information about CREW. Okay, I see a few questions, or I see, have you reached out to other universities like UT and Texas A&M on this program? You know, we just became a hub, a resilience hub, and so we have not yet reached out to them, but I think that is a really good idea. We need to get in touch with our neighbors, so to speak. So that is a great comment, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, Julia, I would also mention that a good contact is to get in touch with Harris County Flood Control and see how they're coming with their research on setting up flood warning systems. I think we can do a lot with much better flood warning and much better flood information. And I think they're working on 2 or 3 of those, but I haven't kept up with the progress. And that's something you guys might put on your list and provide information, because flood warnings will be one of the most important tools we have going forward. And that's certainly true with these bayous and keeping up with the bayous and which areas are overbanked. A lot of times we have differences between different parts of the city. Allison was really more in the kind of the eastern and northeastern side of town. Tax Day was more on the west. Harvey was everywhere, but oftentimes there's just some of these bayous that'll basically rise differently than others because of localized rainfall. And I think that'll be an important thing to keep up with.
Yes, I agree. And then someone has asked, is there a way to check flooding history when buying a house?
Well, one, you should always ask, at least legally, if they misrepresent it, then that is a basis for overturning a transaction. But certainly talk to neighbors. There's not good information out there, to be honest. So many of our flooding events are outside of the 100-year floodplain. So you really can't depend. I would certainly say a 100-year floodplain with the old maps, the current maps that are in effect. Anything in the 100-year floodplain is going to be highly flood prone. Right now, the city is using the 500-year, the county is using the 500-year floodplain, which is based on 19 inches of rain. I think outside the 500 is a pretty good indication, but there's all sorts of localized flooding issues. And I think the best bet is to try to talk to people in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then we do have another one that says, it's directed to you, Jim. It says outline a policy agenda that you would recommend for the mayor and county judge that covers existing gaps that you see regarding climate change, adaptation, mitigation policy, and investments.
Well, that covers a lot of things, and I'm not going to come up with a complete list there, but I think, first of all, just talking honestly about climate change and about the fact that we are experiencing it. We are living through a changing climate right now. It's not something that's going to happen in 2050 or 2100. I think that's kind of a real misrepresentation that has occurred. It's not all in the future. It's happening now, and I think we need to just get that word out. I think, secondly, really 2 things. One, the importance of listening to warnings. This whole thing about, I mean, if someone tells you to evacuate, take it seriously. They don't issue evacuation notices lightly, and I think everyone's going to be on edge with this intensification of storms being so severe. So, you know, it's hard to, as a, certainly as somebody that's a regulator, someone that's in government authority, I think probably the thing that the government fears, I think almost too much, is issuing warnings and then have them not be fulfilled. Kind of, if you will, losing the credibility of the warning. And because of that, we tend to, I think, underwarn rather than overwarn. And I think with these storms and the intensification, we've got to get the word out a lot better than we have. I think the third thing is buyouts. We're going to need more room for water in this community. We've never respected the floodplains in Houston. We've always developed in them as close to the bayous as we could. And we're going to have to move back from the bayous. And people that live there, I have to admit, the thing I've been most surprised about in the work I've done in the community is how much affinity there is for certain neighborhoods. And even after people have been flooded once, twice, sometimes multiple times, people want to move back to their neighborhoods. It's where they're comfortable. And I've been really surprised by that affinity for neighborhood. And it's true in the low income areas. It's true in the higher income areas. It's almost true across all walks in the community. And that causes people to want to go back into dangerous situations. And it's just something we need to understand, but buyouts will be the most important tool, I think, for the next 10 years. We just can't, I just don't think we can build our way out of this with bigger systems. We're going to need more room for water.
Yeah, I think more room for water is key. And then in the chat, it's really nice. Someone has suggested the Houston Makerspace community, and I will include this information on Fondren's Hub website. And it says that the best place to start is the East End Makerspace, 300,000 square feet. And there are 12 makerspaces right now in Houston. So that sounds fabulous. And so I'm understanding these makerspace places are places for people in the community to get together and connect. If there's any more questions, please, you can ask them freely or put them in chat. We have about 10 minutes left. Okay, I see another question. How do we parse the fact that our to and from work traffic is a major factor in terms of greenhouse gases and lost time, as well as concrete, and that business wants to return to business as usual when we should transition to remote work to mitigate these issues?
Well, I think you're going to see quite a lot of changes coming. I mean, I think everyone kind of has this desire to return to where we were, and I don't think any of us will be back to where we were almost ever. I think, you know, the Zoom conversations like these. I used to drive to Austin for a 2-hour meeting and back. I've got a feeling I'm not going to be doing that as much now. Commuting to work, whether we're going to change our work patterns. You talk to people that are renting commercial real estate in town, and they're very nervous about the future, really, of the business, commercial rental space, because they think there's going to be a lot of people working at home. And so I think that I think we're going to see these changes. I do know that there's going to be a major change in the way we think about carbon. Now, whether that's going to affect traffic in town, I don't know. That one's a harder one to address.
Okay, and then we have a couple more questions. Jim wants you to say more about Houston and how TXDOT should address freeway expansion in urban areas like Houston, particularly in Houston.
Well, I've actually litigated freeway expansion. I've litigated on 59, on I-10, Beltway 8. And I think the first thing is the state of Texas doesn't have as good a thinking about flooding as we do in Harris County. And I mean, I can criticize what we do in Harris County, but I am very critical of the state's view of things. We don't really accept climate change at the state level to the extent that I'm not even sure Governor Abbott has yet admitted that our climate is changing and we've got to do something about it. I think, probably implicitly that he has, I'm not sure explicitly. But these, the NOAA Atlas 20, Atlas 14 that I was talking about, the new data that's coming out, the 100-year floodplain maps. I mean, all of those are still being, all the old data is still being used by the state as I understand it. So I'm very concerned about TxDOT and the way they design freeways. I think that, the idea that our major freeways are underwater during these big storm events is something that I don't think we've said enough about. We need mobility during these horrible events. And if you've got, I know 45 gets shut down. I know 10 gets shut down. I know 288 South gets shut down on Brays Bay. I mean, there's 3 of your major arteries that are just inoperable. That's really not acceptable. Now, how we fix it in the long term, I've just not heard it being elevated as a priority. To me, that's about living with water. And like I say, I don't think we've got this appreciation of kind of how we think about living with water. It goes to every aspect of our society. It goes to every aspect of the built environment. And it is a way of looking that's basically very defensive and saying, water's going to be here. We're going to live with it. Now, how do we do that? And I just don't think we've had an honest conversation about that.
Well, and Jim, I feel like it's kind of what we were talking about yesterday about how water can really attack us, right? It can, it like Harvey, it just is everywhere. And, you have to be prepared for that, and not dealing with it isn't going to help us, when another event happens. Jim, there's another question for you. Do you have a sense of the percentage of homes that have flooded repeatedly in Houston? Would a targeted buyout program really move the needle with respect to getting people and property out of harm's way?
I don't have numbers on repetitive flooding per se. I have an estimate of there were 140,000 houses that were flooded in Harvey. I've got my personal view, we're going to need to buy out 40, 50,000 houses. And one of the big issues there is replacement housing, particularly in lower income areas. One of the reasons a lot of people don't want to move is they're not sure what they've got. And particularly if you're in lower income areas, if you have a place that you can call your own, you may not feel secure about what the opportunity is if you sell your house. Where do you go? We've got to combine thinking about housing with thinking about flood protection. And I think we're just beginning to do that. But those two are going to be linked, I think, in terms of long-term solutions. But I would say 40 to 50,000 houses at a minimum will end up being bought out throughout our community, I'd say by 2030.
And then another attendee pointed out that the makerspace, the TXRX makerspace, hosts a solar renewables group as well. And then they ask if there's any ideas to organize boat fleets or drone groups. I know specifically in my neighborhood when Harvey hit that there were people who had boats that went out and got them and helped others. But I don't know anything about organized boat fleets, but I think that is a great idea. And that's kind of the Cajun Navy, right? When they come in and they helped us out, I thought that they were very well organized.
No, they were quite good. It's impressive to see volunteers organized like that and can come in and really be helpful, and they were.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Okay, well, a lot of people are saying thanks for the great presentation. Thank you so much, Jim. It's just been really great.
Well, thanks, Julia. I think you've got a great program here, and I think there's a lot of connections that are there to be found and to really be pulled together. So good luck with that.
Thank you. And thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet.
And here, I'm going to go ahead and put the link to Fondren's hub URL in the chat in case you want to look at it. It's under construction, so more and more resources will be added to it, but I think that we've got a great start right now with a lot of information there. And I will take information that was shared today and add it there. So,
And
thanks
Julia,
so much.
I sent you a PDF of my presentation. So.
Okay, great. So I will put Jim's presentation up there too, along with mine. And if you have any questions that you think of afterwards, go ahead and send me an email. Thanks
Good.
so much.
Goodbye.
Bye. Have a great day.